Welcome in, everybody, to the CFB Nation All-America podcast. My name is Bill Trocchi, senior editor at sportingnews.com, alongside Bill Bender, lead college football writer at sportingnews.com. Bill, we are here to preview Week 11. It's getting late. It's getting late in the season. These games are carrying more and more weight, and as the ranking shows have come out, now we've had two. You have talked about teams trying to they had style point weeks, right? As the rankings were approaching, and now we're going to see who gets tight. Have you seen that so far?
So it's a Tuesday tradition when we're recording that I'm watching my Ohio Bobcats during our window, and they're playing Miami in the Battle of Bricks and winning 10-7. So hopefully that's part of Maction. We love Maction. It's part of the tradition. Get you ready for the weekend. Week 11 should be, I don't know if it's going to be as crazy as the evening was in Week 10, but it's just, like I said, we talked about in our other podcast this week, the theme of this week to me is the entire college football world is going to be rooting for Texas. If you're completing for a playoff berth, you are rooting to get TCU out of the way, which it's kind of a contradiction to me because a lot of the people that trump up playoff expansion and parity and all these things, TCU is who you're rooting for or who you should be rooting for. So why are we disrespecting the Horned Frogs? I personally love them. I think Max Duggan's a great story. I love that Sonny Dykes has been able to flip that. Good fan base, has had success, and Gary Patterson's on the other sideline waiting to rip their heart out. I mean, that's just a huge storyline.
That was one of my most trafficked stories last fall, was when I wrote about why is everybody pulling against Cincinnati, and nobody wanted Cincinnati to make the playoff. And that was the general feeling among, college football fans who obviously were just outside of Cincinnati, as you don't root for the underdog. You want the big programs, you want the big names. And it was kind of funny that, people don't embrace the underdog, and you're seeing it again, like you said, with TCU. People want to see the biggest names make those 4 playoff spots. So let's preview the viewing windows for Saturday's action. Okay, then we'll go into our confidence contest update. It's a dead heat, almost. It's still super close as we get into November. We'll have some Trocchi trivia. We'll make our confidence picks for this week, and then we'll give the trivia answer to close it out. Bill, no cheating, no looking it up while you're making your picks. All right?
I'm listening.
Saturday noon window, the early window, we are going to have number 7 LSU at Arkansas, noon on ESPN. Okay, LSU is a 3-point favorite. Spread opened at 2.5 and has only climbed to 3. So I don't know what's going on here. Vegas is expecting a hangover out of the Tigers in this one, and it might not be wrong, considering some of the photos that I saw coming out of Tiger Stadium on Saturday night.
Right.
LSU 7-2, coming off that huge win, exciting win over Alabama. Arkansas is coming off a home loss to Liberty. They were down 21-0, cut it to 21-19 with a minute to go, missed the 2-point conversion, and lost to Hugh Freeze and Liberty. LSU's had won 5 straight in the series before last year. Arkansas got them in overtime. Arkansas's defense, they ranked 13th in the SEC. It feels like this line and just the general analysis of this game is, where is LSU going to be emotionally? Because on paper, they are definitely the better team.
What did you say the line is now? When we did our picks against the spread, it was 3. It's only 3.
That's still 3.
Incredible to me that, how long are you hungover? It should be one day. Then you take your aspirin and you go. Here's a couple things that stand out from that Arkansas game last week. 3.4 yards per carry, 4 of 16 on third down. This should be KJ Jefferson threw 2 picks. I know it's on the road and it's LSU's 3rd true road game of the year, but I don't see how the Tigers don't take care of business here and keep rolling toward a trip to Atlanta. If they lose, now if you're Alabama and Ole Miss, and preview that game here in a second, I mean, obviously they're glued to their TV hoping LSU messes this up. But I don't see it. I just Arkansas, the season got off the rails a little bit for them, and they've had some injuries. They're going to have some key injuries that they're dealing with. And I think the real story, Bill, is Jaden Daniels, man. What a fantastic year he's having as one of those. We should actually do this story at Sporting News of the transfer roulette wheel and who just hit the jackpot. And LSU's one of them.
Oregon's one of them too.
Exactly.
I mean, Brian Kelly has a reputation of winning games he's supposed to win, right? I mean, that's the last 4 years at Notre Dame. That's what he did. His knock was he couldn't knock off the big boys, but he was good against, whenever he was a favorite. And so I like LSU in that one. And Vegas, like I said, is expecting an LSU hangover. That is the best and only true marquee game in the noon window. Let's skip ahead to 3:30 window on Saturday, which, by the way, last Saturday, the Georgia-Tennessee game, I don't know if you saw 13 million viewers in the CBS Saturday window there. Amazing. That's the number one highest viewed game of the season thus far. I think Michigan-Ohio State will break it. But, I mean, that was an amazing number. So, Alabama at Ole Miss, same window, CBS 3:30, will not have 13 million viewers, but still should be a very good game. Alabama's a 12-point road favorite. It's the other half of the emotional LSU-Alabama game. Let's put our psychology caps on for this one, too. Alabama's 7-2 for the first time since 2010 and virtually no hope of winning the national championship. That was the goal, right, for Will Anderson and for Bryce Young and a bunch of other players. How do they respond against an Ole Miss team they're desperate for a quality win. They don't have one yet, really. If Kentucky, they're hanging their hat on Kentucky right now. They need to hang it on something else. And they're still looking for that big win. They're still alive in the SEC West race. And I don't know if you saw the Lane Kiffin responded to Paul Feinbaum's comments that Saban was kind of done and Alabama was on the way out and the dynasty might be over. And Kiffin labeled it goat fuel, the opposite of rat poison. He was giving Nick Saban goat fuel. And so he does not want Saban getting any goat fuel before this game because, whenever Saban is counted out, he comes storming back. So what do you see out of this game?
Well, I mean, Alabama's only lost 8 regular season games in the playoff era, which is just ridiculous, by the way. And in this will be the 8th one. In the 7 other games, the game they played after, they've won by an average of 24 points per game. But this just feels different this year. It feels different because of the penalties. It feels different because of the mistakes, the allowance that you mentioned in our podcast yesterday, the pass interference calls against LSU, and the worst possible thing you can face coming off a loss is a physical rushing attack coming off a bye week. So I think Ole Miss is going to play. I think they're going to hang that SEC best 267.4 rushing yards per game, 2 running backs, going to hammer away at it. Where Lane got into trouble in this game last year, remember everybody made the big deal about the get your popcorn ready, and then he went for it on 4th down several times and got out of the –
several times.
I mean, just ridiculous. And that was like – I remember we did a feature last year at Sporting News about – and I talked to Paul Feinbaum, and he said, sometimes Lane gets in Nick Saban's head. I think last year it was the other way around. Like Saban was clearly like in his head. And, they're two coaches that respect each other. I think it's going to be – spread looks a little high. I think Alabama bounces back, but this, again, is truly uncharted territory for the Crimson Tide. Still being in the top 10, but, I mean, come on, man. They're not going to the playoff. If they do, it would be the biggest Tuscaloosa miracle yet. I mean, there's no way.
Right, and I don't think this is a great matchup for Ole Miss, though. Like you said, their running game is their strength, but the Alabama's front 7 is still solid. I think their weakness is been in the secondary. Committing penalties, guys running free, and the front 7, I think, will be able to match up with the Ole Miss running game and slow it down a little bit. Honorable mention game, a little off the radar here, an AAC game, but one to pay attention to if you feel like, the winner of the AAC likely will be in a New Year's Day 6 bowl. So if you want to get a little preview of one of these teams, number 22 UCF at number 17, Tulane, 3:30 ESPN 2. Tulane, 2-point favorite at home. This is the first of a rough 3-game stretch for Tulane to close out the regular season. The Wave, the Green Wave, has to play the second place, third place, and fourth place teams in the AAC back to back to back before the AAC championship game. So they have a good record, but they have avoided playing the league's iron, so to speak. UCF, sorry, has the number one offense in the AAC. Gus Malzahn's got it clicking at 501 yards per game. Tulane's got the league's number one defense, holding people to 307. It's a classic little something's got to give game. What do you see between these two down the stretch here?
No, I mean, Willie Fritz, you got to give it to him. This is his 7th year. Before this year, he was 31-43 at Tulane. So this is that long-awaited breakthrough. Great story, allowing 16.9 points per game. It'll be close. I mean, it's one of those, I think, like you said, Tulane's going to have to prove it every week. And if they lose, this is the other half of the playoff debate. I mean, that would potentially open the door for UCF to get back in the New Year's Day 6 or a Coastal Carolina, or I don't think we got one out of the MAC, but all that matters is Ohio just scored on Miami to take a 17-7 lead in the all-white uniforms. Yeah, I think Tulane's a team that we'll see if they can earn it. But I will say this, the one thing, I covered Tulane against Ohio State a couple years ago during the Urban Meyer suspension, and it was one of those, okay, he's back. Tulane played really hard in that game that they were just ridiculously overmatched. And that still stood out. I can't believe I remember that 4 years later, but it was like they got blown out, but you could tell they didn't quit. And I always notice that with teams when they're losing. So he's stuck it out. And maybe a note to some other Group of 5 programs as we get into the coaching carousel that if you stick with a guy, you can have a season like this.
Do you know Liberty's situation with the New Year's Six?
I'm not sure, but
they're an independent. Is it automatically go to a conference champion or not? Do you know?
I don't know. BYU could have theoretically did it. So, I mean, I would think that like if Army went 12-0, they would take them. So Liberty's going to have something to say about that. That's a good point. I should definitely look.
They're actually not in the committee's rankings. They have one loss, and it was by 1 point to Wake Forest. Like, I don't know. They just beat Arkansas.
Also bizarre. Yeah, that's a great point.
The resume is pretty good. So anyway, sorry.
I think Liberty would beat Tulane.
Right. That's my point. Or whoever wins the AAC, and then Coastal Carolina's kind of floating out there in the Sun Belt too. So it'd be interesting to keep an eye on that the top Group of 5 team that gets in to the New Year's Six. Saturday night, we've got the game of the week. Number 4, TCU, undefeated inside the bracket as we speak, at number 18, Texas, 7:30 ABC. Game day will be in Austin. Texas is a 7-point favorite, despite being ranked 14 spots behind TCU and having 3 losses to TCU's none. Game of the weekend. Can't wait for it. It's going to be fun. Not sure how, Texas is favored by 3. TCU beat the 2 Big 12 teams that beat Texas.
Right.
TCU has had to pull off 4 second-half comebacks so far, but the fact is they pulled them off. Great quarterback battle. Max Duggan and Quinn Ewers. I know you're going to dig into that this week at sportingnews.com. TCU wide receiver Quentin Johnson's status will be important. He's an NFL caliber target for Duggan, and TCU obviously is at their best when he's healthy. Last week, he's battling an ankle injury. He only went 2 or 3 plays against Texas Tech. Couldn't go, was pulled out. TCU's being kind of hush-hush on his status. He's averaging about 16 yards a catch, and he had like a 200-yard game against Kansas. He was huge in that game, looked like an NFL wide receiver in that game for sure. So his status is worth keeping an eye on as we get closer to game day. How do you see this one playing out?
I mean, every metric to me like kind of favors TCU. I mean, they're a better one-score game team. Max Duggan, this is his 4th start against Texas. He's won twice, so he's not going to be thrown off by the aura of Texas by any means. They spread the ball out well. I mean, you mentioned the injury there, but they got guys like Tay Barber. They got as the top 2 running backs in the Big 12 as well, between Kendre Miller and Bijan Robinson. So, I mean, typical Big 12 theater. Going to be a shootout. Going to be, Gary Patterson's sideline shot every 5 minutes because he coached at TCU forever and really built that program. I think comes down to Max Duggan. This is another moment for him to lead another victory. And if they get this one, that's 5 wins against ranked teams in six weeks. If they were any other uniform, like if this was an Oklahoma uniform, we'd be like, this is the Sooners team. Or, if this was Texas, if the shoe was flipped, we'd be talking about Texas being a national championship team. No question. Be like, yeah, they've mowed through 5 and 6 weeks and this and that. So, yeah, I mean, that's a huge spot for TCU. That the rest of the college football playoff contenders are going to be rooting against them and putting on their burnt orange, I suppose. But I think it's going to be a close game, a fun game. But doing those picks against the spread for us at Sporting News every week, I get into this with the contest is when I see a line that just looks horrible, I'm walking right into the trap. Is this a trap that Texas is just going to hammer them in Austin? And that's what I'm kind of like leery about now.
Right. I have my friends at the Athletic looking into this fact, and if I get the answer, I will tweet it out this week. Max Duggan has beaten Texas twice in his career already. I'm asking them to research this for me. Last quarterback to beat Texas 3 times. That would be an interesting answer. I don't know if you think of any off the top of your head, but
probably an Oklahoma quarterback, I would imagine. Maybe. Yeah, that would make the most sense.
But how many Oklahoma quarterbacks stay that long?
Right.
They seem to rotate them through.
Right.
So anyway, I just thought that was kind of a fun fact. Hopefully they'll come up with it. Saturday night, honorable mention. We've got number 25 Washington just popped into the poll this week. The college football playoff rankings. Number 25 Washington at number 6 Oregon. 7:00 on Fox. Oregon is a 12.5-point favorite. Another fun one out on the West Coast. There's been a ton this year. Washington beat Oregon State last Friday night on a late field goal. That was a great game. And it was for 5th place in the Pac-12. So Washington is just outside the Big Four of the USC, UCLA, Oregon, and Utah. Huskies have won 3 in a row. Michael Penix continues to lead the nation in passing per game at 359 yards. Oregon's pass defense is ranked 117th. So that doesn't bode well when you're facing this Washington offense. Oregon is on an 8-game winning streak. Quarterback Bo Nix, he's a touchdown machine right now. He's accounted for at least 5 touchdowns, 3 games in a row. They've scored at least 40 points 8 weeks in a row. Vegas doesn't expect Oregon to play tight, but this might be a game where you talked about where, they're punched in the mouth for the first time in a while, and it'll be interesting to see how they respond.
Yeah, I mean, it goes both ways here. I mean, we talked about Bo Nix and everything he's done. They've beat BYU, Stanford, and UCLA, all kind of rival teams by an average of 18 points per game at home. But you kind of see where the line is made when you look at Washington, and every one of their games but one, which was a blowout, has been decided by 11 points or less against FBS teams. So they're used to playing these tight games. A couple tough road losses. They had a tough road loss at UCLA earlier this season, but offense both ways. I mean, makes sense that they hang around in this game and make it fun. And again, Oregon, another team that's starting to get love. I mean, they're in the first part of the montage now on the playoff show that, do they play tight with Bo Nix and have their one close game in Pac-12 was against Washington State, who's a very similar team in terms of roster makeup. So Washington's probably more talented than Washington State, honestly. So it'll be a really good game, I think. And look for Washington to hang around in that one.
Yeah, I think it'll be a fun one. Number 15, North Carolina at Wake Forest. Final game to keep an eye on at 7:30 ESPN2. Wake is a 3.5-point favorite. Get ready for some flag football, Bill. This is the flag football game of the week. The over-under is 76.5, according to BetMGM, which is actually second only to UCLA, Arizona, 77.5. But I don't know if you remember this game over the last 2 years.
Oh, yeah.
Last year, North Carolina won 58-55, came back from 18 points down. And in 2020, North Carolina won 59-53, came back from 21 points down. So maybe the over-under is too low. Maybe 76 is way low. Another chance to see Drake May. Love him, freshman Heisman Trophy candidate. I found that stat I was looking for him. 3 straight games of 250 yards passing, a 70% completion rate, at least 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, and 50 yards rushing. In the last 15 years, no one's done that except for Drake May. So he is on a roll. Wake, just 2 bad performances in a row. I've been on the Wake Forest bandwagon this year, but those losses against Louisville and NC State, not good. What do you see here?
I think North Carolina wins. At Wake Forest, I saw some tweets about how many sacks Sam Hartman has taken the last couple of weeks. They've been beat up a little bit. They're getting after him, and Drake May's riding it. I mean, you want to talk about a backdoor? There's a backdoor Heisman right there, much like Lamar Jackson did because of the numbers. And if he leads an ACC championship run, which is very possible, let's say C.J. Stroud and Ohio State lose to Michigan, Tennessee finds a way, like loses a game, or people just aren't all that. They just have the Georgia game in their brain, and Drake May goes out and lights up everybody for the next month. He could backdoor the Heisman very easily,
including Clemson, right?
Yeah, right. I mean, like he's going to play NC State, he's going to play Wake, he's going to have chances to pile up numbers, and his numbers are already comparable to Hooker and Stroud. So I think there's definitely a path for him to win the Heisman, and we'll see how that goes. But I do like North Carolina in this game. They played some wild ones. They played a wild one last week in some ways with Virginia that got a little tight at the end. But I think Tar Heels stay on task in that wild coastal. And maybe I don't know that it's going to get up to the 58-55 range. It still feels like a 30s game. But I do remember last year's game, and it was one of those hilarious games where every other play was a long touchdown.
I mean, North Carolina's defense is terrible. And that's why they're exciting and fun to watch, because Drake May has to keep scoring and scoring and scoring and scoring and scoring. They're ranked 122nd in the nation in yards per game defense, 122nd. So they are obviously very one-sided, and that's why Wake is a favorite in this game in Winston-Salem. So, all right, let's update folks on our confidence contest. Every week, Bill and I pick 4 games against the spread. We order our picks in order of confidence, like a bowl confidence pool: 4 points, 3 points, 2 points, and 1 point. We each had 3 points last week. Coastal Carolina covered for me. That was my 3-pointer. That's all I got. LSU and Georgia, the 2 SEC teams, covered for you, but they were only your 2-pointer and your 1-pointer, Bill. You got to get the 3s and the 4s. That's the key to this contest. Scoreboard: Trocchi 46.5, Bender 45. Still tight. Before we make our picks, I'm going to give you a trivia question.
Okay.
Trivia question. Think about it while we're making our picks. I think you're going to be able to handle it, but we shall see. Gary Patterson. We're going to have a Gary Patterson theme. How about that? Mm-hmm. Game of the week, TCU, Texas. Of course, he's on the Texas staff now. He has a statue outside of M.N. Carter Stadium at TCU. Now he's at Texas. He's trying to beat TCU this weekend. Gary Patterson had 6 top 10 finishes at TCU in his career. Can you name the last Texas coach to have more than 6 top 10 finishes? So you got Gary Patterson had 6 at TCU. Has a Texas. What Texas coach topped that?
I feel like this is a trick question, but we'll get to it.
It might be a trick question, Bill. So let's move on. I'm trying to think. I think you won the previous week. We split last week, so you still have the honors. You will pick first. Give me your 4-pointer, then I will pick 4. 3, 2, 1. You started us off with your 4-pointer.
Yeah, TCU. I'm taking the 7. Like that's
TCU plus 7.
That's so easy. Like I'm walking right into the trap. Like I said, I mean, I think they're the better team by every metric that I've seen. Like, and especially if it's a 1-score game, I'm going to trust TCU in that game. The way that they're playing, the way that they've been able to rally from deficits. I think even if they lose, it'll be like 38-34. So I look for that to be a last possession type game. I wonder. it'll be as dramatic as the Michael Crabtree game when Texas played Texas. I want to see a game like that if we're going to have a high scoring game. And I just, it's just a slam dunk pick. I'm going to go with the Horned Frogs +7.
I agree with you. I stayed away from it though. I
Yeah.
don't know why. I just felt like game days there, and I just don't trust TCU to go undefeated. I don't know why. Maybe I should. I mean, they've almost lost several times, but they always pull it out. I feel like at some point the magic's going to run out. Texas is dying to beat these guys. TCU's had their number. This is an opportunity to do it. I don't know. I mean, you're right. I went when we discussed it earlier. I mentioned that all the two teams that beat Texas lost to TCU. So I don't know why you wouldn't pick TCU, but I decided to stay away. Wouldn't surprise me if TCU beats them, but I stayed away. My 4-pointer, UCF +2 at Tulane. Good offense beats good defense. That's my theory. I'm sticking to it. UCF goes on the road, hands Tulane its first conference loss. They've got a great record, but they've avoided the best teams in the league so far. You know, UCF has a weird loss to East Carolina, but beat Cincinnati 2 weeks ago. Followed that up with a good win at Memphis. 500 yards a game for the Gus Bus. I'm taking UCF +2.
Pretty sure I've mispicked Tulane in our picks against the spread every week since they've been ranked. So I took them to win. So you're in good shape.
Okay.
That's why my way of telling you feel good about that.
I do. I will.
My 3-pointer is, we just talked about it, North Carolina at Wake Forest. I'm taking there. Why is North Carolina an underdog? The better team. They're like the better offense, and it's going to be wacky like it has been the last 2 years. And I still think that favors the Tar Heels. So Drake May with the ball at the end of the game, it might be wacky, but 3.5. I point taken on their defense, by the way. But you know, I just looking at I remember watching those games the last 2 years, and North Carolina just made the plays when it matters. I think Drake May will spread the ball out and bolster his Heisman campaign. Could be a 380 type yard game for him, and another ranked underdog that I'm just going to take. I think they're the better team. So there's 2 traps I've walked into.
Yep. Well, I'm going to walk into a trap right here. For my 3-pointer, I'm taking LSU -3 because Vegas is begging us to take LSU, right? I mean, and I'm falling for it. I don't understand how a top 10 team in November, we've got a lot of data at this point, is playing a 5-4 team that has losses to Liberty and Texas A&M and struggled with Missouri State. And LSU is only a 3-point favorite. I mean, they both played Alabama at home, Bill, right? Alabama beat Arkansas by 26 points and lost to LSU. So, you know, and Bryce Young got hurt in the second quarter of that game when Alabama played Arkansas. So, I mean, everything on paper says LSU is a 10, 15-point favorite, should be a 10 or 15-point favorite. So it's a trap game, but I'm going for it. I'm going to fall for it. LSU -3.
Yeah, just press repeat because that's my 2. LSU
Okay.
-3. Everything you just said. Not much to add on to it. Just I feel everything about that. I mean, we talked about it earlier. I just think LSU is the better team. I don't know why this line isn't. If I was guessing this line when I kind of was sketching things out Sunday night, as I always do, I would have thought it was like 7.
At least
7.5, maybe with a hook, or 8. And
yeah,
I feel like there's value here with the Tigers. All they have to do is go win. Are they like expecting like a Jaden Daniels meltdown game or a KJ Jefferson versus Jaden Daniels is very exciting to me. I am excited to watch that part of the game, but I just think LSU is the better team with more things to play for right now. And unless you're resorting Arkansas to spoiler coming off that bad loss, seems like slam dunk. So I'm right there with you. There's one. I said we'd have 2 before we came on. I think we'd have at least 2 of the same picks. So we've got 1.
We got 1 2-pointer. My 2-pointer, I'm going with Ohio State, number 2 in the polls, -39.5 against Indiana. We talk about Ohio State's offense, right? Whether it's great or like last week and it was terrible. Why was it terrible? Why can't they run? And by the way, the dirty little secret is their defense is awesome. They're number 6 in the nation in total defense. You know, no one scored more than 21 against them, except Penn State. They scored 31. They had a meaningless touchdown with a minute to go in that game. JT Tuimoloau has
That's it.
become the latest beast for the Buckeyes. Indiana, they're only averaging 19 points a game in Big Ten play. Quarterback situation's a mess. They used 3 quarterbacks last week against Penn State. I think Ohio State's ready to, correct last week's poor showing with one of those 40, 50-point outbursts. Indiana is not going to be able to move the ball against this Ohio State defense. Ohio State, I think, is going to cover the 39.5.
The line did move down. It was 41.5 when it opened. So that's a little interesting to me. I would have taken it at 41.5 because that's 6 touchdowns. But yeah, point taken again. Indiana's bad.
I could see 55-7 or something like that.
It was not that long ago that Indiana played at Ohio State, pushed them to the limit, and people were making a Big Ten championship case for the Hoosiers in that COVID year. And I don't think Ohio State people have forgotten that. So that's going to be ugly. I think the Buckeyes I don't know that it'll be as legendary as what they did to Michigan State last year at home late in the season, but they're going to put up a big number here, I think. So not a bad pick at all. My one is Notre Dame at Navy -17. I like the Irish. And it is different because it's Marcus Freeman going against that Navy attack for the first time, but they just have pounded Navy in recent seasons. It's not the same Navy team as usual. I think the Irish are getting hot at the right time, and Notre Dame or Navy will try to limit their possessions, but this just feels like the one year where they just 38-14. So I like Notre Dame to win that game by 17, keep their hot streak going, and building some momentum to that USC game. It wasn't all that long ago that we were wondering out loud if Notre Dame was going to go to a bowl game. Now we're wondering how awesome of a bowl game is it going to be, and it's been a good run for the Irish and a good turnaround for Marcus Freeman.
Yeah, like we said, they couldn't get out of their own way when they were trying to block Marshall and Stanford, and then they were blowing through the vaunted Clemson defensive line. We'll see what they do to Navy. I assume they're going to blow through it, and I assume Notre Dame's defense is going to keep Navy in check. The defense has been playing great. The special teams have been playing great. The Irish passing game is not up to snuff at the outside passing game with Pine and the wide receivers, but they're probably not going to need it to cover this number. I like that pick too. My one pointer is going to be Duke -9.5 against Virginia Tech at home against Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech's lost 6 straight games. The latest, a home game to Georgia Tech in a game where the Hokies had a punt return for a touchdown and an interception return for a touchdown. And they still couldn't beat a Georgia Tech team that was down to their 3rd quarterback and an interim coach. Things are not going well in Hokie land. Duke 6-3. They're coming off 2 road wins, and the game before that was that narrow loss to North Carolina where they probably should have won. They missed a field goal 2 minutes ago that basically would have clinched the game. So Duke's playing pretty well, and I think Virginia Tech is not. So 10 points is not too much for me. I like Duke as my one pointer. So to review, Bender, trap game TCU +7, trap game UNC +3.5, trap game LSU -3, and Notre Dame -17. My 4-pointer, UCF +2, LSU -3, Ohio State -39.5, and Duke -9.5. Before we get out of here, I want to hear, and I'm not going to blow the answer this week. I am not blowing the answer this week. You're going to have to answer it.
Good.
Gary Patterson has 6 top 10 finishes. Name the last Texas coach to have more than 6 top 10 finishes.
It's probably Daryl K. Royal would be my answer. Even though I want to answer Mac, I don't think that would be too easy. So I'll say Daryl K. Royal, who the stadium's named after.
You got it. Daryl K. Royal. Mac had 6 as well, and I said more than 6. So Mac Brown had 6 top 10 finishes in his tenure at Texas. Gary Patterson had 6 top 10 finishes in his tenure at TCU. Bonus question, can you name the leagues Gary Patterson coached in during his TCU tenure?
I can't. I think I can. I know he coached in the WAC, the Western Athletic Conference, the Mountain West Conference, the Big 12. Is there a 4th league? Oh, and Conference USA.
4 for 4, Bill. You
Yeah.
got the
So,
bonus question
well,
even.
so here's my thing, and we can.
And that was actually a trick question because he was an interim coach for one game when they were still in the WAC.
They are the school, along with Utah, that have really provided the model for everybody. Like, to me, like, they've gone because of that journey we just mentioned. They've been dying to get in this spot. I think, from the Andy Dalton days that, I remember the WAC days, the LaDainian Tomlinson days, that they've made this kind of slow climb to this window. And that's why when they get disrespected, it's almost against my personality. We know each other a little bit here, that I'm normally the elitist, the snob, I want to see the 50 NFL guys on the field. I don't need this nonsense. But I've kind of taken to them, and we joked about that with Kansas earlier in the year, but I've kind of taken to this team because I like Duggan. I like their running game. I like their style. And, I'm excited to watch the drama with Patterson and all of this with Texas, because if they put it on Texas Saturday, I mean, that they're really bolstering their case. So I just think it's because most people assume that Georgia would do to TCU something worse than what they did to Tennessee. But you know what? We saw them beat Tennessee once. Let's see what happens here.
It's going to be fun. It's going to be another great week. It's going to be a lot of shakeups. Your bye week is over. You're back on the field. You're ready to go. You're all stretched out. I'm excited to have you back Saturday night. We'll have good coverage at sportingnews.com. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this week for all of our podcasts here at CFB Nation All-America Podcast, and enjoy the weekend.